Jeremy Courtney is the founder of Preemptive Love Coalition. It is an international community development organization that has provided nearly 800 open heart surgeries for Iraqi children. Amazing work. Following God and his redemptive love. So I'm gonna ask Jeremy a few questions, and we're gonna explore tonight together just a little bit, just a taste of redemptive work in the gospel. So Jeremy, just tell us a little bit about your story, how Preemptive Love Coalition came into being.
Well, 8 years ago, I moved my wife and our 1-year-old daughter to Iraq. It was the middle of the Iraq War at that time, and the height of sectarian violence, sectarian killings were going on across the country. And I was sitting in a hotel cafe, drinking a cup of coffee when this guy, the guy who worked in the cafe, approached me, and he said, "Hey, Jeremy, you've been coming here for a while. Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, I've got this cousin. He's like a 20-something-year-old guy like you and me. He's got this little girl. She's about this big. But when she was born with this huge hole in her heart, and after all these decades in Iraq of dictatorship and war and violence, there's not a hospital or a doctor left in the entire country that can save her life. You're an American. You're a Christian. We've talked about that. I was just wondering if you could maybe help me, help my family, help my cousin and his little girl." One thing led to another, and as I got to know that guy better, I got to know his family better, we became aware not just of that one little girl, but actually hundreds and then soon thousands like her who were waiting in line for these life-saving heart surgeries. We began to hear people sitting with the First Lady of Iraq and sitting with the Vice President of Iraq called into some of these relationships and meetings and conversations. They wanted to tell us about Saddam Hussein's usage of chemical weapons against his people and how that had caused a 4-fold and 10-fold increase in heart defects and other birth defects among their people. And then we go to another village or another city, and they'd want to tell us about American weapons and how American weapons had caused a 10-fold increase, so that in Fallujah, 1 in 7 babies was born with some kind of birth defect. And so we were drawn into this community, and we were kind of placed at this fork in the road where we had to ask, "God, are you trying to lead us to do something about this?" And so as a community, as my wife and my family, we decided that we really wanted to throw in our lot with these kids and wanted to declare ourselves to be on their side and do something about their situation. So
it's amazing. It's amazing. Tell us a little bit about the church in Iraq. I mean, and what it means to be in community in the midst of extreme poverty, the threat of ISIS. What does it mean to seek wisdom in community as a believer in that context?
Well, I guess I wouldn't presume to speak for the church in Iraq. It's as fractured at times and as diverse as the church is here. You certainly have an age-old historic church. You've got a contemporary church. You've got evangelical incursions into Iraq that are relatively new. You've got ancient, age-old practices that predate many of us. So I wouldn't presume to kind of speak for all of that, but I'll just speak for myself and our small team and our community and say that, well, let me say this. The whole idea of seeking wisdom or seeking to live wisely, I guess that's not at the forefront of how we think of things. Wisdom or I want to be wise about this situation, or I want to lead wisely or something like that can actually, I think, be a bit of a red herring. It can be a distractionary device that actually allows us an out, allows us to wait and say, "Oh, well, I want to be prudent about this situation." So I don't think in those terms. I don't think in terms of wisdom. I would actually encourage you not to think in terms of being wise. Be lavish, be bold, be big. Wisdom can give you an out. And let me put it this way. We think about being Christ-like. That's how we that's the rubric through which we view the world. And so wisdom might lead me to pull my family out of Iraq right now. Wisdom might say ISIS is on our doorstep. We need to get out of here. Wisdom might say they're beheading Christians, they're marking Christians in their home. We should pull out. I don't know that that's the Christ-like response, though. So I try to think Christianly. What John is going to come up and tell us about tonight, the story of redemption, there's a lot of faiths in the world that can talk about creation. There's faith in the world that can tell us about fall and brokenness. But what John's going to bring to us tonight is the uniquely Christian proposition that there's a way to be redeemed. There's a way to be made whole. And that hinges on Jesus. And so there's different pockets in the world where you can find wisdom, but Christianity and Jesus alone offer this idea that God does the foolish thing of dying for his enemies, of laying his life on the line when it's not wise, when it's not prudent, when it doesn't make sense. And so in this time, I want to just suggest that we need to worry about being more Christ-like than we maybe worry about being more prudent or more wise. So that's how we're trying to live and lead as a community. We're trying to figure out how in this time of ISIS, how in this time of great sectarian divide, in this time where the church does appear to be under attack of sorts, when the church appears to be on its heels, how can we live Christ-like in this moment? How can we lean in, lead in, even if it means death on behalf of our enemies?
Thank you. That idea of taking risks in light of the glorious grace and of the gospel. For students who are here, they're thinking these problems are way too huge. Where do you start to take those kinds of risks into that kind of life with God and on mission? What would you say? Where would someone start? What was helpful for you?
Yeah, I mean, you start with your English Lit paper due tomorrow, and
amen.
And and that's what this conference and this group, this community, so inspires in me, is that you guys don't get so hung up on some future thing that you're going to do 15 years from now, but you actually place a whole lot of value on what's happening in your life right now. And you understand that what you're faithful with today has everything to do with whether or not God would entrust you with something in the future. And so start where you are. Start one step at a time. You can't solve the world's problems. You really can only solve the next part of the equation in many ways. And so take what God's given you right now, today. Focus on being godly, on being Christ-like. Get to know this story, and it's all four parts of it, and embrace that entire story. And let that lead you forward into whatever vocation, whatever channel of culture or life that God's leading you into. Small bites, small steps, faithfulness every day of the week, every moment of the day. That's how we get on. We don't only tackle the big stuff out there. It's got to be right here today, right in front of us, the small stuff, the faithful stuff.
Amen. Thanks. Everyone, let's give a hand to Jeremy Courtney.
Thank you, guys.